Welcome to Caleb Can't Read. I'm Jordan Rabel.
I'm Caleb Terrence.
We're having a bit of a, I don't know, it's been a day today, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Took a shower together, took a nap together.
Mm-hmm.
We came up with a new word.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if we should explain this.
Look, it's going to probably come up some way, somehow. And we're not going to mean to. It's just that we've been writing on this word for so long. So if a man happens to reach climax inside of your butthole, we call that goofing now. You've been goofed. And we cannot stop saying it. I don't know where it came from. I don't know why.
I feel like this is going to be just a for us thing. Anytime somebody now calls you a goofball, it's just a whole. And that's just going to be between
why
the
you
two
acting
of us.
so
I don't think
fucking
we need
goofy,
to be
huh?
shared with the listeners.
Let's go get fucking goofed, boys.
Fucking
Saturday
goofed.
night. And currently, hey man, listen, it's
Goofy bastard.
it's a fucking 100 degrees, and it's not getting better throughout the day. Like, it's still 100 outside right now, and it's fucking 6.
Yeah.
You know, if you hear a buzzing in the background from either an AC or the fan as we're double blasting it, just getting goofed on both sides, look, you're gonna need to fucking deal.
Yeah,
This is a low quality podcast.
We're dedicated enough to do this in this fucking heat.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? Deal with it.
Yeah.
We're also a week late on this just because things happen. You know?
For the one listener out there, I just want you to know
just
that
noticed and was really mad.
that I went out and worked in 100-degree weather today, and I am still recording this for you. I love you.
Caleb is currently in
We don't need
just
to tell people
overalls,
this.
no shirt.
It's fucking hot. Fuck off, man.
He's dressed like a fireman stripper. And
It's hot.
It's going to be hard for me to
Don't
keep my
shame
eyes
me.
on the script.
Don't.
I
do
just
that.
watched
Don't make
you
it
rub
weird.
fucking aloe vera on yourself. So.
Yeah, dude. I'm burned. My chest is purple. It fucking
Behind the
sucks. Yeah, it's back deep behind the hair. It's not doing good under here.
Oh, did I get a new carpet? Oh, no, Caleb's on the floor. All right, cool.
Yeah, fuck off. Dude, I'm getting the upper back hair finally.
Oh, good.
I'm starting, like the wings are sprouting.
Finally.
Like, I was fucking wondering.
It's like, shit, man, maybe my dad's not my dad. Like,
I don't know.
Nope, there it is.
Yeah, I don't know what to do about that part of my body. I don't know if I should wax it or not. I don't know.
I mean, would you go somewhere to wax it? It seems
Yeah,
hard
I'd
to
have
to self-wax. You'd look like you've got, like, fucking
maybe I could just
hieroglyphs
find-
and hair on your fucking body.
If I just had a caring friend.
I'm not doing it. Look, any day of the week you ask me to fucking goof you, I'll do it, but...
So you'll fucking goof me, but you won't fucking wax my back hair.
No, I'm not going to. I remember, like, meeting you for, like, the first 2 weeks, and you were like, hey, man, look, I really need a friend. I'm like, yeah, what's up? And you're like, I got a lance on my... I got a zit on my ass. I need you to lance. I'm like, I'm not doing that. Like, that's... Do you remember that at all? Why would you? That was
vaguely.
probably a fucking Monday for you.
Yeah, it's fine.
It was like, no, go get Parker, dude. I don't want
Fucking lance my ass boil, you coward.
No. Well, no better segue into it than to talk about Willa Cather. So,
Did we have something?
no,
God
don't worry
damn it,
about
dude. I didn't listen again.
Oh, you mean in like the 2 weeks that it's been out?
I have a really hard time listening
I get
about
it.
this fucking writer, man.
Look, Nebraska, Marlon Brando's from there.
I feel a yawn
Fred
coming
Astaire.
on.
Huh?
I feel a yawn coming on already.
Good. One of the like 3 rules that I have for you.
I'm sorry,
It's
dude.
like, don't yawn.
It's just you just start talking about the Midwest and I get fucking
I
sleepy.
get it. I
That's
get
a
it.
normal human reaction.
That's true. I mean,
Okay.
anyone from Nebraska, they are just really tired fuckers because, they just go, "Hey, how's it going, Joe? I'm good. Feeling
It's
like
just nothing like I don't know, man.
there's nothing more exhilarating than look. This is what
this is going to be mostly
she put
you talking.
Nebraska on the map. I mean,
Didn't we haven't you made me go to sleep with this twice and this is the third time we're trying? Or was
We
it just
did-
the once? I was
No, we
really
did-
sleepy.
we did record like 2 paragraphs like a week ago, but the fucking card got corrupted. So it was like, well, we might as well start from scratch. So, and it's not like you fucking remembered.
No.
So either way, let's
Especially
get in,
not this one. Jesus fuck.
let's just get into it. Let's go for it.
Okay.
I swear, part 1, Yeah, it's mostly Nebraska. This part, it's going to be fairly more interesting because she's actually reached a stardom status at this point. That's where we ended last episode.
Oh, yeah. Recap.
So Willa Cather, she grew up in Nebraska, and she had a she had a career definitely within editing. She went to several different magazines and became head editor to a lot of places, a lot of famous magazines such as McClure's. And she actually helped a lot of other writers get their stardom status through magazines where they were published because she was a great fucking editor. However, she definitely had that those who can't do teach attitude, unfortunately, where she tried to release a book of poetry. Nobody cared. She tried to release a novel. Nobody cared, but they cared a little bit more. So eventually she does go on to produce 2 other books called O Pioneers and Song of the Lark. And those were the first 2 in the Prairie Trilogy. And again, it's not like she tried to create a trilogy about Nebraska. She was just writing what she knew and loved, which was primarily things based on her childhood. So let's get into it. Oh, and I will remind you that during this time, I have to emphasize this because it still pisses me off. For 39 years of the last 39 years of Willa Cather's life, she is, and currently in this part of her life story, she is with a woman named Edith Lewis that she will stay with for the last 39 years of her fucking life.
Jordan? Do you not like lesbians?
Because everyone says she's not a lesbian.
That's really offensive,
because all of fuck you. Because all of her friends burned their letters that had anything to do with lesbianism, and so she got casted out from history as a lesbian. And granted, that's what she wanted to have happen because she died when that was still a thing that people didn't want getting out. But no, for God's sakes, wear that badge proudly. I mean, I'm not lambasting her over it. I'm just telling people.
You're approaching this really weird.
What?
I don't know what about this is weird, but it's weird. I don't know.
Like, you're the authority.
I'm not, but I know well enough to know that it's weird.
Fair enough. Well, so going into her 1918 final book of the Prairie Trilogy, My Antonia. The story begins with an introduction that is not told from our main character, Jim Burden's perspective, but a friend of his. This friend says that he's known Jim for a lot of his adult life in New York City. Oh, sorry. What, does it not smell like beer?
No, it smells like fucking hot dogs, but like inside of a person hot dogs. It's fucking gross.
I mean, to be fair, I guess I am kind of like
burp in my face when we're at a table with microphones together.
All the fans pointed at you.
You fucking fat ham piece of shit. God damn, dude.
So, this friend, the narrator, says that he's known Jim for a lot of his adult life there in New York City.
I had a quit too, and now it's gone.
Though they rarely see each other these days. Partly because Jim is always away on business, and also because the narrator hates Jim's wife. But lately, in Jim's dreamy nostalgia, he's been talking about a friend of his from his childhood days in Nebraska that he's recently bumped into, a woman named Antonia. When prodded further about his childhood with this mystery girl, Jim goes into wild spiels about her. And the narrator says to Jim that he'd be interested in reading about these exploits if he just so happened to write them down, rather than taking up what precious time they have together talking about this Antonia. You know, like, if you're only going to have limited fucking time with your buddy, and you hate the guy's fucking, like, his partner, then you can, don't waste time talking about this girl. I'm sorry, this might resonate with you a bit.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Well, a few months later, Jim produces a packet of papers for the narrator to read. On the cover is the single name Antonia. But before handing the manuscript over, Jim thinks for a moment before pulling the pages back, taking out his pen and writing, My Antonia, instead. Now, before we jump into the actual story of My Antonia, I just wanted to point this out. With each subsequent edition of this book, Willa Cather would just change random shit. Paragraph spacing, single words, literally changing one word from my to our at one point. She did this for the next 20 years. But anyway, this entire introduction scene was cut out of the book entirely by the time its 1926 edition rolled around. Don't know why, but I guess if you decide that's how the book starts, it's up to you. Anyway. I first heard of Antonia on what seemed to me an interminable journey across the great midland plain of North America. I was 10 years old then. I had lost both my father and mother within a year, and the Virginia relatives were sending me out to my grandparents, who lived in Nebraska. I traveled in the care of a mountain boy, Jake Marple, one of the hands on my father's old farm under the Blue Ridge, who was now going west to work for my grandfather. Jake's experience of the world was not much wider than mine. He had never been in a railway train until the next morning when we set out together to try our fortunes in a new world.
20 fucking years, huh?
20 years.
All right.
The story begins with Jim Burden at 10 years old, recently orphaned and moving to his grandparents.
I mean, like, it's fine, but I don't know.
Look, I didn't go through each edition of it. I went through the final edition of it. Or actually, you know what?
Like, I don't know, lady. Maybe you could have changed some of those words around a little. Maybe a little more.
Change Nebraska to maybe New York or New Jersey.
What changes do you have to make in telling me about sad Midwestern people? You're just stating things. Like, you're not.
That is fair, but I will say, I mean, I don't know. This must have been her fucking baby. And to be fair, this is a book that is widely regarded as like people's favorite of hers. Not mine personally, but anyway. So the story begins with Jim Burden at 10 years old, recently orphaned and moving to his grandparents' farm in the town of Black Hawk.
Fuck. Yeah?
Black Hawk. Who gets to name this town? Let my stepson Jeremy have a try. Traveling by train.
Didn't change that one in 20 yeyears. Just kept it, right?
I don't know why people think it's funny. It's a beautiful name.
Nobody proofread that and was like, like laughed.
It's a fine name, for my name isn't Mike Hunt. Traveling by train with his parents' old farmhand Jake, Jim learns that there's only one other group of people on their way to Black Hawk, the Shimerdas, a Czech family. But only their little girl, Antonia, speaks any English. And while they don't initially speak on the train, Jim's grandparents force him to come along with them to welcome the Shimerdas to their town. They're a bit empathetic because they know whoever bought that land had been taken advantage of and not from around there, since they couldn't have known that the quote-unquote house they were sold is little more than a cave with a roof over it. So I did mention this. I guess it was a bad spot to fucking break up our 2 episodes in, but basically the character of Antonia is actually based on a immigrant girl from Red Cloud, Nebraska, where Willa Cather grew up, named Annie Pavelka. And the Pavelka family really, I mean, this is practically an autobiography for her, or a biography, I should say. But I saw a picture of, like, because in the book, they make it sound like they're living in a fucking cave. And I was like, that's weird. And then when I was researching this and I saw a picture of Annie Pavelka's real life quote unquote house, I was like, oh, they do live in a fucking cave. So basically what it was a huge fucking rock, like a giant boulder that was halfway sticking out of the ground. And there was a crack.
I swear to God, if you just describe a cave to me.
Well, I mean, it was uncovered on the top. It was a big crack in it, and they basically lived in the crevice of this rock.
So they just had like a
and they just put like a tin roof over the top of it. They still hung pictures on the walls, had fucking rugs, but it was just dirt, and just they lived in a fucking stone. Like, damn. They pretty much just lived in a hobbit hole, you know? Like,
no. Hobbit holes are like, you know.
Don't go into the fucking stop.
Not just
no,
like
stop. Okay, I'm sorry.
No,
I brought
Jordan,
up Tolkien and
no,
fucking
no.
No. Look, this is for your own podcast. All right.
I can't figure out the equipment. Bastard.
Also, there's no way the Shimerdas weren't overcharged for their land in particular, because the ground's so fucking tough and no one in their right mind would want to farm there. But during their visit, Jim and Antonia find that they're great playmates, even if Antonia's English isn't very good. But as the weeks go by, little by little, Jim teaches Antonia English while he comes by to help with the farm chores for the Shimerdas. Jim, what is goofing? No.
No, dude. No, it's not gonna be funny. It's an inside joke.
I know.
Goofing is for just us.
Look, man, it was just for you.
Okay?
It was for you.
We're gonna goof each other.
Prove
now, move along. Stop being such a goofball.
Well, one day, Jim and Antonia are out for a ride on their horses when a big-ass snake gets spooked and coils up at them. Jim manages to kill it with a shovel, and Antonia is super impressed. Jim brings the carcass home while Antonia tells everyone about how heroic Jim is. Quote, he fights something awful. He is all over Jimmy's boots.
I hate when you do accents, man.
I scream for him to run, but he just hit that snake like he was crazy.
You just mixed. Okay, no, every time you do that, I'm going to fucking yawn.
Oh, why?
Because fuck you and doing your accents.
What's wrong with my accent?
The accents are bad.
Am I going to offend any Bohemians?
No, it's not about offending anyone listening. It's about making me fucking cringe right here.
Aw.
Fuck you.
Now, in a nearby farm are these two Russian brothers, Peter and Pavel. And one day, Peter comes to Antonia's family for help, saying that his brother was slipped while climbing a ladder to the loft or something, and he's taken a great fall. Well, when the Shimerdas and Jim Burden come to help, Pavel's already paralyzed and bedridden. As the hours go by, he becomes more and more delirious the closer he gets to death. Pavel keeps mentioning the wolves. The wolves. On their way back home with Mr. Shimerda, Jim asks Antonia what Pavel could have meant, and she's heard the tale before, so she tells it to him. When Peter and Pavel were younger men, they were part of a wedding in the woods held in their native Russia. Tasked with driving the married couple in a sledge back to their village from the party, the four of them soon became the only survivors to an attack by a group of wolves, which tore through the remaining wedding attendees. But soon after, the wolves went after the sledge as well. All of the people in the sledge know it's far too slow as the wolves draw closer. In a moment of wild desperation, Peter and Pavel throw the newlyweds from the sledge. What?
That's just profoundly shitty.
Well, I mean, what else? I don't know.
You said this is autobiographical, right?
The easier kills succeed as a distraction, and the two brothers get away. Of course, word soon gets around of how these two could be the only survivors of a wolf massacre, and Peter and Pavel are run out of their community. Getting as far away from those that wish them harm, they naturally fly to Nebraska.
Mm-hmm. There's no wolves in Nebraska, you see.
Fuck, I don't know. Are there?
Probably not now.
I don't know.
Fuck.
The corn.
Fuck, there's probably fucking timber wolves or something. As far as we know. No, I thought corn...
Timber wolf is a wolf, right?
Yeah, it's like a big-ass fucking wolf.
That's a wolf.
It's a big
all wolves are big.
He's not a good boy. Not at all.
Maybe coyotes at best? I don't know.
I mean, there's coyotes everywhere.
I feel like the natural cause of death in Nebraska is usually suicide. So
Probably like an overdose on something.
Fucking ethanol.
Fucking tetanus. Probably COVID currently. Yeah, probably COVID.
Probably. You don't see people for miles. How are you supposed to catch COVID?
I don't know. I just feel like it's not really a mask place. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's because you're distancing by 6 miles. Anyway, the parallels to the Russians' tale of death only become more apparent as winter draws near. Unfortunately, Jim's grandparents' predictions about the Shimerda farm are correct. They haven't been able to grow anything, leading to them becoming desperately poor and nearly out of food as the cold sets in. Seeing this, Mrs. Burden goes to them with a basket full of food, but Mr. Shimerda refuses, saying that they were not known to be beggars in Bohemia. But of course, Mrs. Burden insists, leading to Mr. Shimerda to make a trade instead, his own basket of food that he gives to the Burdens. Once Jim and his grandma make it back home, though, she tosses the contents of the basket as the food he gave them has all gone bad. They're going to end up with a fucking witch situation, eating fucking ergot. Well, because of this, the Burdens look for any chance to quote-unquote trade Antonia's family some food. Like, they won't just accept random gifts, so it has to be something that they can kind of pawn off to the family, you know? So when Christmas comes around, the Burdens quickly have Jim go out and give them some more food, and in exchange, Jim comes back with a fucking tree. And not for everyone, Caleb. Would you want to take your work? Great. Do you want to take your work home with you?
No, I don't.
Like a fucking scratch.
I don't go outside when I'm off work. It's disgusting out there.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, as adorable as the Shimerdas can be, not everything is as it is on the surface. During the winter, Mr. Shimerda kills himself with an apparent axe to the face, which, yes, some find a little suspicious, me included.
He hit himself in the face with an axe.
They do
15 times.
They do kind of hint that like maybe that wasn't him that did it, you know. Well, Jim poetically says that it was homesickness what really killed him, but personally, I think it was the axe to the face what did it.
Yeah, someone hit him in the face with an axe.
There's no Catholic priest to lay him to rest, as the town is mostly Protestant, and no graveyard will take him since it's a sin to take your own life. His body stays in the Shimerda's barn for 4 days while they figure out what to do, eventually deciding to bury him on their own property. The town pulls through for the family, though. They not only help them construct a new log cabin so they no longer have to live in a fucking cave, but also a windmill is built and some people even donate some cattle. But this uptick in responsibility means that Antonia can no longer attend school when the school year begins like Jim can. And with school taking up most of his day, Jim and Antonia practically become strangers. Even more so as the Burdens decide to move off their farm and closer to the edge of Blackhawk. But when Mrs. Burden learns that their new Norwegian neighbors are in need of a cook, she suggests a nice young girl she knows named Antonia. And Antonia, while she does accept the job, has a bit of a hard time adjusting to life in town, as suburban as it is. Because as they get older, while Jim gets to learn how to fight and curse and spit, Antonia has to learn how to be a lady. One story I like from this part of the book is that Antonia, for whatever reason, decides to tell this nice Norwegian family she works for about a homeless guy that wandered over to their harvester and just fucking dunks himself in. And the kids freak out, but the parents are like, reminds me of home. Like, that's the way it is. But because of their differing male and female roles, there's no time allowed between Jim and Antonia themselves. Their only consolation is to meet up at late night dances. Basically, instead of doing anything cool like drinking or fucking, the kids just dance to the radio, just as Satan would want. Well, even with this, Jim has to eventually stop going to the dances because tearfully, Mrs. Burden finds out that Jim is throwing his life away by dancing, and he has to promise never to return. Fucking, I didn't think Footloose was really based on the real thing.
He needs to be resting for more farming.
Well, I mean, no, he's going to school at this point. They don't even live on the farm. They live in Blackhawk now.
No, so why is he even... Oh, yeah.
Because it's sinful.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. Oh, God, it's so hot.
Yeah, it's getting really bad for some reason.
It's not even safe in here.
No, it's not.
Well, growing even further apart, Antonia stops working for the Norwegian family next door to the Burdens and bounces between different jobs for different families.
Oh, Jesus, that's a fat fucking stack of papers. We are going to be here for a while. Oh, God.
The worst of which, listen to this, the worst of which is the Cutters. They're just this extremely angry couple that like has these very public arguments and don't give a shit if anyone is listening. And Antonia is hired to house sit for them overnight, being told by Mr. Cutter that he stashes his valuables under his bed. So Antonia has to stay in his bed to protect them. But of course, this is creepy as shit, so she asks Jim to do it instead. And sure enough, Mr. Cutter shows up in the dark just hard as the dickens.
Oh.
Only to find Jim in his bed instead of a young lady. Quote, "The hand that held my shoulder was instantly at my throat. The man became insane. He stood over me, choking me with one fist and
beating
me in the face with the other, hissing and chuckling and letting out a flood of abuse. Jim has to fight his way out the fucking window and ends up just absolutely fucked up. Clothes all torn. He's actually bleeding because he was fucking cut with something, but he doesn't even know what. But again, as Jim becomes college age, he sees even less of Antonia. Until one day he hears she's actually getting married. With this as a final blow to Jim, he sets out for Harvard with nothing holding him back. When he returns a couple of years later, he finds that Antonia never did get married, but the guy left her with a kid, so it was obviously going to be a shotgun wedding. Jim visits her, and they reconcile. Antonia wants to bring up her baby into the Nebraskan world, and Jim remembers his time with her lovingly. As he walks back to the old house he used to live, he imagines 2 children running alongside him. Quote, "As I went back alone over that familiar road, I could almost believe that a boy and a girl ran alongside beside me, as our shadows used to do, laughing and whispering, to each other in the grass. And honestly, this is where the book should have ended, but instead we're given a few more chapters where Jim comes back to Blackhawk 20 years later, and she's got like a whole gaggle of kids now, and they talk about old times and that guy who tried to rape Antonia that one time, Mr. Cutter, killed his wife and then himself. I don't know.
Was that the situation? No, we kind of glazed over that. I was like questioning that in my head. I was like, wait, was that a sexual assault? No. Surely it wouldn't have done that so casually.
Well, they talk about it casually too. Like, hey, you know Mr. Cutter? Yeah. Killed his wife and then himself. Get out of town. You know?
Yeah.
I don't know. The whole ending part really felt unnecessary to me. And the book ends with Jim sitting and watching the Nebraska landscape. And like, that last part is nice, but could have easily been segued in from when he was walking back to his old house and imagine the younger versions of themselves, you know? Anyway, this is how it ends. Quote, "For Antonia and for me, this had been the road of destiny, and taken us to those early accidents of fortune which predetermined for us all that we can ever be. Now I understood that the same road was to bring us together again. Whatever we had missed, we possessed together the precious, the incommunicable past." Now, Annie Pavelka, the inspiration to Antonia, was apparently so much like the character that you can look at their lives side by side, and it kind of comes off like an unauthorized biography, like I mentioned before.
What do you call it again?
It's a biography. Oh, you're talking about an novel?
Yeah.
That's something else completely different.
Okay.
That's when you're talking about yourself, but you don't want to fess up to the incriminating shit, so you kind of fictionalize it a bit.
Okay.
But for the first time, as opposed to the other two in her Prairie trilogy, Willa Cather decided to write My Antonia in the first person, as she said that any story that has deep emotion like this is best conveyed through the eyes of its characters. Although it wasn't actually her idea, it was an editor at McClure's that suggested it to her. While O Pioneers and Song of the Lark were both well received, it was My Antonia that put Willa Cather in the forefront of novelists for her day. Luckily for her, there was a real want for books about farm life at this point. I had no idea why. It was just the hip thing to get into, I guess. Maybe people just thought it was quaint. And to show that My Antonia was the quintessential farm book of its day, Willa even opened her story with a quote from the Georgics by Virgil, which, if you'll remember, was that poem he made about how great it is to be a farmer because he was forced to. And that itself was a huge theme in My Antonia. The words Willa Cather uses to paint her environment could be used as instructions to paint a fucking portrait if you wanted. It's beautiful. And the American literary critics were actually thankful for Willa Cather bringing American literature to light. We wouldn't really get our foothold in the literary world as a country until the 1920s, with books like The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald and Moby Dick by Herman Melville would be rightly rediscovered and celebrated the world over. But at this point, it was Willa Cather's Prairie trilogy, My Antonia in particular, that circulated around the globe and made people appreciate Nebraska, of all fucking places. And this was, to a lot of people, what would be the staple of American literature, our calling card, if you will. Boring stories, but brilliant prose, which you can definitely see recited in The Great Gatsby. As a matter of fact, Fitzgerald even said that The Great Gatsby was a failure in comparison to My Antonia. Which today, though, I mean, people don't typically know My Antonia. But for the last 8 years, Willa Cather has been publishing under company Houghton Mifflin, and they were steadily getting worse and worse as a publishing house. The quality of their books was going downhill, and while I'd say a good chunk of authors wouldn't care so long as they were getting the recognition they deserved, Willa was furious about the pages not sticking to the fucking binding. But the final nail in the coffin between her and her publisher was that they only spent $300 on advertising for her latest book, a little under $6,000 in today's money. And they were so cheap that although she'd commissioned a famed Polish painter named W.T. Benda to do illustrations for My Antonia, Houghton Mifflin refused to pay him. Which, I mean, that's kind of fucking shitty, honestly. And I will at least say thank you, Willa Cather, for being pissed off about the pages not sticking to the binding, because it's a problem. It fucking sucks.
Oh, yeah, I know about that.
When I say binding, what do you think that means?
The little back bit, the little spiny bit, what the pages sit in.
See, good job. You did it.
Well, how many parts are there to a book, man? Like, really, how hard do you think I had to think about that? Like,
I don't know. Curious.
What was I going to say? Like the cover? Like what the fuck?
It just falls apart in your hands like glue. But there was a young new publishing company called Knopf Inc., recently started in 1915 by married couple Alfred and Blanche Knopf, that had a reputation for treating their authors fairly and, above all, actually putting money into their advertisements. And Willa Cather wanted nothing more than to work with these guys. So she set up a meeting immediately. However, as Alfred Knopf himself was quick to point out, under her contract with Houghton Mifflin, all novels by her would have to be published by them for the next few years. But he did also point out that short stories were not a part of the contract at all. So, for no other reason than wanting to publish with Knopf just so bad, Willa Cather went back to her old failure short stories, The Troll Garden, from 15 years prior, took 4 of the 7 tales, revised them a bit, and turned them into half of her new collection of short stories she called Youth and the Bright Medusa, releasing it in 1920. And as soon as her contract with Houghton Mifflin ran out, Willa Cather quickly signed a new one at Knopf Inc. Now, before she had even met with the Knopfs, Willa was working on something that she truly felt was special. From 1919 to 1921, she had a story that was so personal to her that she didn't want Houghton Mifflin to fuck it up, so she just never told them about it. Otherwise, they would try to fucking goad her into a new contract at the very least. It's safe to say that had they found out about the book, they would have tried to strong-arm her into another contract. Willa wanted this story to immortalize her cousin Grosvenor, who had died just a few years prior in France. If you'll remember, her little cousin that she grew up with in Red Cloud fucking went to France, got Swiss cheesed by like 7 German machine guns or something, and she found out about it while she was getting her fucking hair did, which is just fucking traumatizing to like read about that and then not be able to express that, or if you are, then everyone's watching you. That's just a horrible situation to find that out. Who the fuck
does that while somebody's getting their hair did?
Well, nobody. They didn't have people coming from the army to basically come tell you.
What the fuck? Well, why while she was getting her hair? It's not like she got.
She was reading the paper.
She didn't like get a text, man. Like
no, she was reading the newspaper.
Oh,
like yeah, that's the whole thing. Is
and
like
they were like local lady's kid brother gets Swiss cheese.
Yeah, literally. I think they probably would have the common sense to send it to a next of kin, like his parents or something. But like. Yeah, they didn't have a chance to write a letter out or anything. They just had a long line of obituaries. And, of course, everyone is there first thing in the morning like, is my fucking kid dead? And so, of course, she looks it up, and sure enough, her fucking... And they say it, too. Like, they're just like, how he died, too, which is worse. You know?
Yeah, that's not... I don't think they do that anymore, do they?
No.
Why would you do that? Like...
It's fucking horrible. I mean, you could probably just go on Google Earth and watch it happen live.
In war, from guns, machine guns, from 7 people. Well, just say he's dead. Like
his last words were, God. Well, using his own personal letters from Grosvenor, Willa Cather constructed the main character of her story, someone a bit lost in life, to show just how tragic it was that they used boys as fodder during war. But of course, she only knew about war from what the papers would tell her, same as everyone else. Which, it's no secret, don't really tell things as they really are. You know, a lot of nationalism in there and whatnot. So to get better in depth with her knowledge of the war, Willa interviewed every veteran in Nebraska that she could. And what she learned was so different from what they tell you in the papers that she felt it was important to document these real accounts and let the people know. So she published her interviews with these veterans in an article called Roll Call on the Prairie. But finding that even interviewing the witnesses of the horrors of war wasn't enough, Willa Cather decided to go to France just to see the battlefields firsthand and accurately portray them in her novel. Remember, World War I had just ended like a year prior to her writing this story, so the damage was still fresh. And with all this research, Willa Cather produced one of her most famous novels in 1922 from Knopf Inc., One of Ours. Claude Wheeler is a young man in college who yearns for nothing more than to free himself from his parents' grasp, particularly his father's. When Claude picks one college, he's forced to go to another. When he wants to sign up for anime club, his father forces him to do football. When he wants to do one thing, he must do another. But one day, Claude meets a family at school that basically take him in as one of their own. And what do you know?
I wouldn't want my son to be a weeb either.
Fair. He thinks he's got his best interests in mind, but, I'm sure it's very toxic there in Nebraska. Just, no, you're going to be in 4-H. But this new family, what do you know? They're very open to new experiences, not the sexual ones. And they have a big focus on music, sharing and discussing each other's point of views and whatnot. But even with this little taste of freedom, it's one day taken away from Claude just like everything else, as his father expands the farm, and he needs to pull his son out of school to work as an extra farmhand. Alas, although Claude only wants a good education, his future will be on the farm, whether he likes it or not. And it's while toiling the fields and bringing the product to town one day that Claude meets a young woman named Enid. She's pretty enough, but religious to a fault. Her life goal is to be a missionary in China, that kind of thing. She even rebukes Claude's for being friends with an atheist. And weirdest of all, she's a vegetarian. Which was actually kind of unheard of back then. Basically, instead of it being about animal rights, a lot of people back then would only be a vegetarian if they needed to do it for medical reasons. Otherwise, it meant that you were taking a stance against killing any of God's creatures. So yeah, she was one of those kind of Christians.
The latter?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, while Claude is not interested in Enid, he's one day riding his donkey along the side of the road when a passing truck freaks the donkey out and forces him to run under some barbed wire with Claude still riding on top. Claude gets really fucked up, his face especially, and the soon infected cuts...
She's pretty enough now, huh?
The soon infected cuts cause him to become bedridden with his face all covered up like a mummy. And the only person to care for him is dear sweet Enid.
Why? Does he have, like,
she probably
and
thinks,
shit? What the fuck?
I mean, she probably sees it as like a kind act of God, like loving all creatures sort of thing. I don't know.
His family was just like, yeah, dumbass shouldn't have ran into barbed wire. I'm not taking care of you. I don't understand
Pretty
this.
much.
Like, why is this phrase like the only option?
Let me get me a cider.
Yeah, I got you.
Good Lord. Is it still cold?
Mostly. I'm having a hard time opening this. Okay, there we go. That's
better. We're trading hands over the equipment. All right.
$600 equipment, which is probably laughable if anybody's
laughable
listening.
To like who? Fucking Markiplier or something?
I don't fucking know. Like anybody who listens to this who
professional.
actually has like a podcast like.
Well, guess what? We're probably more popular than you anyway, freak. No.
Yeah, at least like we didn't like. I don't know, because you don't want to be those like really lame people that like have a podcast on the level of ours that like have dumped money into like making an entire fucking studio and shit.
Oh God.
And paid for like a whole bunch of horse shit.
People don't care about us enough for us to do that yet.
I don't care about this enough for us to do that.
Yeah,
ever.
that's true. Actually, yeah.
Like,
you guys have 1 million followers. Neat. I still work.
like, yeah. Like.
Well, it's from this time in recovery that Claude truly sees Enid's sensitive side, and wanting to see her sensitive insides, proposes for marriage.
God damn it, dude.
But it's hard to say that their marriage turns sad, as it was sad from the very beginning. Enid is grossed out by sex, fully forbids Claude to hang out with his atheist friend, and is away for long periods of time fighting for
Lady, you can just tell me if you're asexual. It doesn't have to be a religious thing. It's fine. Like, come on. It's like...
Well, here's the thing. She's also away for long periods of time fighting for prohibition with a male missionary that Claude is pretty sure she wouldn't find so gross to fuck, unlike him.
This lady sounds kind of horrible.
Yeah. Well, as Claude eats dinner alone for the 100th
wait,
time...
I'm being a dick. She, like, nursed him back to health when he was all fucked up. Like,
I feel like that was with ulterior motives, though. That's her wanting to get into heaven or something like, God gave me a test, and it's like, no, I'm a person. I'm actually here.
No, I just have a really bad infection.
Yeah. Well, as he eats dinner alone for the 100th time, he realizes this is it. The American dream everyone yearns for.
Yep, I'm eating dinner alone while my wife is out making sure no one
just
can
out
drink.
Getting cucked. Yep. I can't even drink in the house.
Just making sure nobody's having fun. I'm not having fun here. She's going to make sure nobody else has fun out there.
I have all this corn and no makings for whiskey. As Claude's family fixates...
Is that what whiskey's made out of? Fucking corn?
I think that you can make corn and distill it into something else.
I thought, like... I mean, it's like
it's
corn...
one of the...
Isn't corn whiskey like moonshine-ish?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so... I mean, with it being
whiskey,
prohibition. Huh?
I thought is whiskey just like...
Wheat?
I thought it was just like...
Look, I drink it and I like it. I'm not going to look what's into it. It's like McDonald's. It's fine. I don't want to know what's in it.
It tastes bad.
What, whiskey?
Yes.
It's not for everyone. That's okay. You like vodka? I hate vodka.
I love vodka. You know why I like vodka? It doesn't taste like anything.
Ugh, it tastes like hairspray. It's horrible.
You know what I had that was amazing? Horseradish vodka.
Did you go to Kachka?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's fucking amazing, dude. They have this, oh, fuck. What's that, like, briar seed or what the fuck is it called? It tastes just like bread. It tastes like drinking bread and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's so good. Anyway. I really want to go to Kachka now. Fucking, hey, if you're in the Portland area, go to fucking Kachka, dude.
They don't need to be hyped up more.
Man, dude, there's like no one around for lunch. Everyone's there for dinner. Go there for fucking lunch. It is like there's nobody there, and it's worth it. Oh,
I think it's pretty fucking good, but I don't know, man.
So
it's not
good.
like y'all really hype it up here, and like I don't know.
I've never had Russian food before that, and it's really good Russian food.
It's really good, but it's not like as good as it's built up to be.
I don't know how built up it was. First time I heard it was Nicole saying, "Hey, you want to go to this Russian place called Kachka?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll eat." You know, like so.
Yeah,
it was really good.
Like, there's a cart down the street from there that has, like, I swear to God, like the same quality.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, I'll find out about that too.
Like, if you put the two fucking plates next to each other and then mix them up, I would not be able to be like, "That's Kachka."
Oh, cool. No, I love to hear about that because it sounds cheaper than Kachka.
Yes.
So anyway, as Claude's family fixates on the ongoing war in Europe, the day finally comes when America joins. And a call goes out on the radio for any able-bodied young man to join the fight. Claude, looking at his options, decides this is his calling. But on board the ship to France, before any fighting can even begin, there are casualties, as a bout of influenza threatens the lives of everyone on board. It's from Claude's handling of the situation and his help aboard the ship with the infected.
Speaking of handling, how
that
does
he gets
influenza
recruited.
spread?
He gets recruited as a medical assistant. What?
How does influenza spread?
I don't. You know what? It's a great thing that we have vaccines because I don't fucking know.
Okay.
I'm guessing from coughing next to a bunch of military men because that's what happens here.
Oh yeah.
Now, when they finally arrive in France, Claude finds a familiarity with the French landscape. The cottonwoods specifically look more beautiful to him in foreign lands than they ever did in Nebraska. And he sees supplies stamped with American businesses.
I want you to know it took a lot of strength to not talk to you about cottonwoods right then.
Good.
I care about you a lot, and I do this for you.
You still brought him up.
I know. I just wanted you to know how virtuous I was.
And he sees supplies stamped with American businesses, feeding and healing the French people. And Claude feels a sense of pride in his American duty to help others in the world. But he also sees the devastation. Child soldiers executed, held prisoner, and wounded beyond anything he could ever imagine. Are cottonwoods easy to take down?
Shut up.
Yet he sees
they're very scary.
all of this as justification for why he must fight. And when a friend he makes in war gets shot down by German pilots, Claude nearly congratulates his buddy's death as a noble purpose. In the final chapters of the book, Claude is given command of a small troop guarding a trench and are almost immediately thrown into battle. Claude has a runner send a message to another troop, but I don't know why. I couldn't figure it out, but I have to imagine it's for reinforcements. And Claude prays to God that if either he or the runner be killed in battle, please let it be himself. His wish granted, Claude is killed by German forces without learning that his messenger was killed as well. Though his death was needless, the book closes on his hometown, where he's seen as a local hero. Now, this was a very quick summary, by the way, because while this is actually Willa Cather's longest book, it is by far the one which has the least amount of things going on it, and I was bored to tears.
Oh, no shit.
I actually did enjoy her other books quite a bit. Actually, O Pioneers
How is this the most boring one? It's got like war and shit.
I'll get into it.
War and barbed wire and donkeys and
Because even though she fucking did this research, she was wrong
and
all the
hardcore
time.
Christian chick pussy and
I'll tell you, man, like this, O Pioneers is what made me finally quit, but my Antonia was fucking great, and I think the next one that we'll go over in length is my fucking favorite, but either way, the book was a major success, mostly due to both the large advertising budget not put forward, and because of their earlier success of Cather's Prairie trilogy. However, from a literary standpoint, one of ours was not without its criticisms, most of which were focused on the second part of the story, the war, Everyone loved the farming bit. It's what she's known for. But for all of her research into the topic, Willa still somehow managed to fuck this up. She made it seem like these guys wanted to go to war, that war was good for some people. And I can guarantee that there wasn't one guy she interviewed that was happy he went. Like, World War I is the scariest war. And Ernest Hemingway thought the book was overrated because of it. He even wrote to a friend, quote, "Wasn't the last scene of the lines beautiful? Do you know where it came from? The battle scene in Birth of a Nation. I identified episode after episode, Catherized. Poor woman, she had to get her war experience somewhere." And actually, I went back and did this. I reread the battle scene to one of ours and then watched the ending to Birth of Nation to see the similarities, and they don't match up at fucking all. I feel like Ernest Hemingway was someone who just really hated women. So, like, I don't know. I get that vibe from him. Yeah, they didn't match up to a fucking dot. And contemporary writer Sinclair Lewis, who would go on to become the first American recipient of the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1930, pretty much said the same thing as everyone else did when it came out to one of ours. He said he loved the first part of the book, but the second part was, quote, all the commonplaces of ordinary war novels. And by the way, Sinclair Lewis would always, like, personally write Willa Cather after every book she put out, praising the realism of Nebraska. Said that he loved to see the recognition of native Nebraskans in literature, which is weird because from what I could find out, he never fucking lived there. So I don't know what his fucking kink was with it.
Maybe he drove through once. I don't know. Like,
as much as he needed to. Ah, they're poor. Good job. But perhaps the harshest review to one of ours came from one of Willa Cather's closest friends, someone who she met all the way back at McClure's in 1910 when Willa was acting editor. A woman named Elizabeth Sargent was a journalist who spent the entirety of the war in France. And I mean, front lines. She was severely injured when one of the soldiers she was touring with picked up a fucking grenade that was thrown at them. And, like, Willa could have just asked her how war was, but instead, Elizabeth Sargent said that Willa had, quote, idealized war, and as a result, largely stopped speaking to Willa Cather at all. Regardless, one of ours took home the 1923 Pulitzer Prize. It gave Willa Cather such a large audience that she decided to re-release her old book of poetry, April Twilights, that same year.
How'd that go?
Well, she if you'll remember, she bought the rest of the copies that weren't bought of this book, and she fucking torched them because she was so unsatisfied with it. And now the book was another hit because it had her name on it. Now, the same year she received her Pulitzer in 1923, Willa Cather released a book called A Lost Lady, about the decline of the American frontier into the Roaring Twenties, and with it, the death of the American dream. This was also a huge influence on F. Scott Fitzgerald, apparently, as when The Great Gatsby came out, he sent a letter to Cather apologizing if he unintentionally plagiarized anything from her novel. Cather's next novel...
Weird. Okay.
Yeah. Maybe don't point it out, you know?
Hey, man, just call and let you know I'm really sorry if I stole anything from your place.
Anyway, I'm a man and I can do that, you know? Cather's next novel, After a Lost Lady, was released in 1925 called The Professor's House. And while neither of these books are celebrated as anything memorable by her today, both of these novels helped spring Willa Cather even further into stardom at the time. While one book released in 1926 called My Mortal Enemy pushed her a step back. There's nothing else to say about it other than it apparently isn't a very good book. In fact, Willa never mentioned My Mortal Enemy in anything. Lectures, interviews, personal letters, whatever. She never mentioned this book ever again after it came out. So take her word for it, probably. In 1927, Willa Cather told a fictional retelling of the true story of two Roman Catholic missionaries.
Oh, that was a
what?
Fictional retelling of the true story.
Okay, so these are two real-life guys, but it was a fictional retelling of their story.
Okay, so she bothered to say it was about two real guys, but not about two real...
Historical fiction.
Okay.
It's about two Roman Catholic missionaries that were sent by the Vatican to the newly claimed New Mexican territory. My personal favorite of hers... Death Comes for the Archbishop. The book is a fictional account of Jean-Baptiste Lamy and Joseph Projectus Machabeuf, and the book called Latour and Vaillant. who have been given the assignment to collect all the various peoples of the newly acquired New Mexico and put them under the servitude of the Vatican. And these two priests, they've known each other for a long fucking time. The one priest is like 20 years older than the other, but he's always been there for the other guy. When the younger one was afraid to go to war, the older priest recruited him to the church to help save his life. So they've been like brothers from that point on. And at this time in America, the trains would only go as far west as Cincinnati, so Latour and Vaillant must make their way by riverboat and donkey to the Western Territories, where bastardized versions of Catholicism have already reared. Oh, God.
How you doing, bud?
Oh, fine. Basically, there were just people that would like crop up and start essentially cults and call it Catholicism and try and recruit people. The book itself is very episodic. Like, they keep running into these versions of priests that stand for metaphors for greed and gluttony and lust and stuff like that. But my favorite part is when they go to a house out in the middle of nowhere and they ask this guy if they can stay the night, and he's all like, yeah, sure, come on in. And this guy's wife secretly comes over to the two priests, and she's
just
like,
stay in the woods, man.
yeah, she's like, that dark patch of dirt in the yard is where 4 other travelers are buried. My husband is nuts. You guys got to fucking go. Like, it was a very McCarthy-esque chapter. It was really good. And like, I know that this is just a really quick summary of events, but it has one of my favorite endings of all time too, where like the two priests haven't necessarily brought the entirety of the West under the control of the Vatican. Technically, they have failed, but at least they've done a good job of getting things started in the right direction and built a new church. But like, the older priest is on his deathbed, and the last thing he thinks about is how he met the other priest when he was a young kid and scared to go to war. Quote, he continued to murmur, to move his hands a little, and Magdalena thought he was trying to ask for something, or to tell them something. But in reality, the bishop was not there at all. He was standing in a tip-tilted green field among his native mountains, and he was trying to give consultation to a young man who was being torn in two before his eyes by the desire to go away and the necessity to stay. He was trying to forge a new will in that devout and exhausted priest, and the time was short, for the diligence for Paris was already rumbling down the mountain gorge. Death Comes for the Archbishop was an instant classic when it was released and has since become one of the essential reads of every high school English class. Around this time...
Oh, that's why I don't know it.
Actually, I never heard about it before. I saw like a list of like, oh, the books they made you read, and I kept seeing it cropping up. I'm like, what the fuck is Death Comes for the Archbishop? It looks metal. Like, and then of course it's... Yeah. Well, around this time...
Oh, shit, Willa Cather. Fuck.
Around this time, Willa Cather would be invited to schools everywhere to give lectures numbering in the hundreds. But soon she would be ill-regarded as yesterday's news. Now the thing is, after World War I, the world was largely split into two groups. Those who believed in a new and ever-changing world, and those who held onto their old ideals. Like, maybe we can go back to the way things were. Well, Willa Cather was part of this latter group. She didn't want to see the world become new and scary. She wanted things to be safe. But by the time the 1930s rolled around with the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression, people saw her work as nothing more than nationalistic and pure fantasy, which is kind of unfair. They wanted these stories just a few years ago. She couldn't predict the future. But still, critics began to reassess Cather's works, saying that she was unrealistic in her portrayals of American life. Things aren't okay on farms. It sucks. The one word they kept using to trash her...
Hey, this fucking sucks.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, I know. That's fine. It's sorry, you know. And the one word they kept using to trash her work was nostalgic. And it's like, yeah, that's how things were back when she fucking wrote it, you know. But although she soon declined in favoritism among readers, her popularity grew to the point that she was on the cover of Time magazine and listed as one of the most influential women in America. And she still trudged on, releasing 2 novels and 1 short stories collection in the early 30s. Shadows on the Rock in 1931, Obscure Destinies in 32, and Lucy Gayheart in 1935. Taking place in the town of White... Oh, that didn't work.
No. No, that's weirder. I don't like that. You're being weird again.
And the short story collection, by the way, Obscure Destinies, is composed of 3 different stories where the main character dies in each of them. which, while bleak, this book was released the year after Willa's mother passed away in 1931, so maybe it kind of makes sense. Regardless, all of these books, while good apparently, only granted Willa meager success, as she couldn't outright what the critics had to say about her past works. Despite this, Willa still sent money out to entire families during the Great Depression to make sure they got by. Didn't even tell anyone about it, just tried to fucking help. In 1934, a movie adaptation of her 1923 novel A Lost Lady was released, bearing almost no resemblance to the story it was based on. Willa Cather hated the movie so much that she later stipulated in her will that forbids there ever be another representation of her work on stage again, which didn't really take. There have
Stage
been
or movie?
both.
Oh.
I mean, at the time, stage was more present, but there was a movie, and she was like, I never want to see any of my work ever adapted, ever. Fuck it. And it didn't really take. There have been several movies made after her death. Just after her death, though.
Just like, haha, fuck you.
But yeah. Haha, you're not even gay. Yeah, I'm sure. In 1938, Willa received two major losses in her life. One was her brother Douglas, and the other was Isabel McClung, the woman whom she lived with in Pittsburgh, and claimed that every
Her roommate? Yeah, her roommate. Yeah.
She claimed that every book she ever wrote was dedicated to. But
Just a good roommate.
yeah, but her dictation was very well done.
I mostly just get angry with my roommates. Can you imagine? What a wonderful life this woman must have had.
But Willa was so unbearably grief-stricken by her brother's loss that she couldn't even actually make it to his funeral. Just 2 years later, in 1940, at the age of 67, Willa Cather would release her final novel, one that would be much darker in tone than anything else she'd written before. The book is called Sapphira and the Slave Girl. The story is about a... Don't put that look on your face, don't worry. The story is about a woman named Sapphira Colbert, living in a large house with a couple of slaves. Her husband, disapproving of slavery, along with their daughter Rachel, seldom sees his wife and basically lives at his mill full-time, rarely coming by for even a meal. Sapphira has health issues and rules her household with an iron fist. Her loneliness turns her paranoid.
What are her health issues, Jordan?
She's like chair-bound.
Chair? What the fuck does that
She's
mean?
basically in a little wheelchair. She's frail. She's weak. I don't know. She's an antebellum girl. She doesn't really get out much.
Okay.
I don't know. I didn't read it.
Oh, all right.
Her loneliness turns her paranoid, believing that her husband may be having an affair with the prettier...
What the fuck is chair-bound? I've never heard that in my... Say wheelchair.
Chair-bound.
What?
Okay, fine. It's fucking strapped her to a chair.
Chair-bound makes it sound like somebody just needs to untie her from a chair.
I mean, maybe this one doesn't.
Is that what you're supposed to say instead of somebody's in a wheelchair?
I don't know.
Fuck.
You all chaired up?
I don't...
Y'all fucking...
Trying to get goofed.
Hey, man. Hey, man, you sitting down for this? Well, she believes that her husband may be having an affair with the prettier and healthier of the two slaves, Nancy. So, of course, Sapphira begins mistreating her horribly. When that doesn't seem to do the trick, Sapphira invites her...
Is it because she can get out of a chair? What?
She can rise for the national anthem. Well, when that doesn't...
Possible editing point. 57. Making fun of wheelchair people. Not good. Not good. Too low. 5805.
Oh, you're going to
notation.
say too low. That's not, that's
Fuck
not cool.
off. No. We do not make fun of fucking people in wheelchairs. We are not doing that. No. The fuck out of here.
So, when mistreating Nancy doesn't seem to do the trick, Sapphira invites her psychotic nephew over in the hopes that he'll just rape Nancy.
What? I'm sorry. I was going to the notepad on my phone to make a note of the time.
When just being mean to Nancy doesn't do the trick, she invites her psychotic nephew over in the hopes that he'll just up and rape Nancy. Just, that ought to do it. Well, the attempt fails, but Sapphira's husband and daughter find out about what she's done and help the Underground Railroad get in contact with Nancy to help her flee the South. Is it so wrong to make fun of that woman in a wheelchair?
I guess not.
It's fine.
Yeah, but that's not...
It's fine.
Yeah,
We're
I don't
fine.
know. Yeah, okay.
What are they going to do? Cancel us? Where are our sponsors going to leave us?
Don't take that attitude with it. Don't get edgelordy with this.
No, God, no.
Okay? No.
I do remember, hanging out with some friends in a bar, and he was like... One of my buddies was like, really attracted to
I
this
don't think this is going to go in
girl
a
in
good
a
place.
wheelchair.
Okay. Why are you laughing at that?
Because he was like, I don't know what to tell her. Like, how do I hit on her? And they were like, hey, girl, are you...
Definitely
Are your
don't
legs
mention anything about her being in a wheelchair.
Are your legs tired? Because you've been running through my dreams all... I was like, yeah, if that doesn't work, ask her if she fell from heaven. Now, even though the story... Now, even though the story was weird and outlandish, the book was still a critical and commercial success. Although, as pointed out before, only those closest to Willa knew how dark her life had recently turned with all the deaths. And instead of harping on her about her nostalgia, as had been the trend, the question all the critics seemed to have was, is Willa Cather all right? It's a weird book to leave your legacy on, and while it is, of course, an anti-slavery book, she says some weird shit in there that hasn't exactly aged well. Like, she uses the term darkies quite often. And apparently the vernacular... Yeah. Apparently the vernacular she used whenever a black woman had a piece of dialogue is very cringy.
Oh.
Use your imagination.
Yeah, I'm not gonna.
Even my brain is just like, how
Don't
dare
do
you?
it
How
yet.
fucking dare you? But although Sapphira and the Slave Girl is not widely read today, it is still widely studied when it comes to scholars on Cather's work. In classic Willa Cather fashion, she paints a beautiful picture when it comes to her descriptions of things, but what she's describing in this story is fucking horrific. So, like, which is it? Maybe she couldn't break away from her style? Author Toni Morrison has seen the description of Nancy's attempted rape as maybe something sexual, even, for Cather. Like, maybe Sapphira, being chairbound, was calling in her nephew to do what she couldn't. I don't know. I didn't read it, so I can't
I don't like
argue.
this thread at all. I don't want to pull on this anymore. I want to move on.
Yeah, no, we're going to. I'm just saying, Willa Cather is widely studied. But, like, it is for sure, out of everything we've talked about so far, if you have one that stands the fuck out of a lineup, it's this one. So, yeah, there's some weird shit in there that people are like, was she losing it? Like,
Probably.
Well, anyway, despite a terrible bout with carpal tunnel syndrome, Willa continued her writing. Specifically, she was hard at work on a new, even darker novel called Hard Punishments, which she would never complete. From what we know about it, it would have been about two protagonists set in pre-New World Europe. The two men were named Andre and Pierre. Andre had his tongue cut out for blasphemy, and Pierre was tortured by hanging by his thumbs and now has fucked up hands. And that's really all we know about it, because as Willa told her forever roommate Edith, quote, "If I die before it's finished, burn it," which she did. From the early,
She really likes to burn her books.
I mean, it's fun. Like, I don't know. It's fun to have fires. I don't know.
I don't know.
From the early to mid 1940s, Willa Cather was given late awards for most of her work. She was given the gold medal for fiction from the National Institute of Arts and Letters and was elected fellowship at the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. But even with this, Willa went into darker places. She underwent gallbladder surgery in 1942, which largely restricted her movement, and was diagnosed with breast cancer in late 1945. Within a month, she underwent a mastectomy. However, the surgery had little success and the cancer quickly spread to her liver. About a year later, on April 24th, 1947, Willa Cather died in her Manhattan home at the age of 73 from a cerebral hemorrhage. She had a really painful last few years. And as mentioned before, Edith burned all of Willa's letters and unfinished manuscripts per her request, including what would be known as Willa Cather's lost novel, Hard Punishments. Willa was buried in Jaffrey, New Hampshire, where her old friend Isabel McClung resided with her husband. Now, the date on Willa's tombstone is something of interest to me. She was born in 1873, but as time went on, she constantly moved the date up to be younger and younger than she really was. So the date on her tomb reads 1876, 3 years younger. On her headstone is a quote from my Antonia, quote, "That is happiness, to be dissolved into something complete and great." The last few unpublished but finished stories of Willa's were collected into a short story collection called The Old Beauty and Others.
Did they burn them?
No. Well, because she actually finished these.
All
they
right.
just weren't published. And released in 1948. One of the stories, called The Best Years, was a story she had actually written for her brother Roscoe, but never sent, as he unfortunately died in 1945 at the age of around 68. The story is often regarded as the last she ever wrote, about a family gathered together at the death of their sister, remembering the past. Apparently, there's a lot of autobiographical stuff in here, talking about how she and her siblings lived in the attic in Red Cloud and stuff. Although they didn't end things on the best of terms, Willa Cather's friend Elizabeth Sargent, the one who was a journalist stationed in France during World War I, did write one of Willa Cather's first official autobiographies in 1953. The Willa Cather Foundation was set up in 1955 by schoolteacher Mildred R. Bennett in Red Cloud, Nebraska, which has since kept the town alive in a lot of ways. They've preserved Cather's childhood home, also the church that Antonia goes to in the book, and a couple of houses that inspired the settings for her novels, even the Burlington Depot station where Willa would meet immigrant families as a child. Not long after seeing their siblings' life immortalized, Willa Cather's sisters Jessica and Elsie died in 1964, with their brother James following shortly after in 1966. The impact that Edith Lewis had on Willa Cather's writing has been subject of debate for some time, since the two were...
That's her roommate, right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
they were extremely private about their working relationship as well. Most saw her as nothing more than a sometimes editor of Willa's work, but I find it interesting that not a single one of Willa's stories is dedicated to Edith. And to me, it's because while Willa Cather's name may have been on the cover, the stories were something that they probably produced together. As one scholar put it, quote, "She let in the woman with whom, rather than for whom, Cather wrote her fiction." Edith Lewis passed away on August 11th, 1972 at the age of 89. She was buried beside Willa Cather in Jaffrey, New Hampshire, a place famous for having Willa Cather's body. Her birthplace in Gore, Virginia, while registered as a national landmark in 1976, has sadly not been upkept and looks fairly close to a haunted house. Though the problem may be that it is mainly made with asbestos. I read an article interviewing the old man who owns it, and he's just like, yeah, one more storm and it's fucking gone. Her second home, Willowshade, was registered in 1990, and the house where she truly grew up in Red Cloud, Nebraska, was registered in 1971. And I will say, after Edith's death, most of Willa's things seem to have gone to her nephew, Charles Cather. But once he died in 2011, all that shit became open. I mentioned it before, but even after 2,100 letters became public, a lot of her friends, and Edith in particular, did a good job of following her last wishes for all of her letters to them to be burned. So even though Edith Lewis and Willa Cather spent the last 39 years of her life together, people still aren't sure if they're actually gay, because not a single
Shut the fuck up.
not a single letter exists that
Shut
says
the
so.
fuck up.
I know. It's just let it. It's fine. It's fucking fine. And it was really just, goddamn, dude, to watch like a PBS documentary and have everyone be like, yeah, probably not. No, it's like, are you fucking kidding me?
Like,
It's fucking fine. It's cool, dude. It's chill. Just leave it.
it's fine. We don't even have to go over it, but obviously, yes.
I know.
Like, duh.
My sources today. And I guess last episode, because I didn't read out sources, so fuck you. My sources have been O Pioneers by Willa Cather, Oxford's World Classics paperback, 2008, My Antonia by Willa Cather, Viking Penguin, 1994, One of Ours by Willa Cather, Vintage Classics edition, November 1991, Death Comes for the Archbishop by Willa Cather, Vintage Classics edition, April 1971, Willa Cather, The Road is All, American Masters, PBS 2005, New York Times obituary, from June 25th, 1918. That's where I found out about her cousin, and Wikipedia. Yeah, I mean, I gotta say, I first found out about Willa Cather through like that fucking meme of like listing off books from like high school and shit like that. I was like, Death Comes for the Archbishop. I read it, and while there's a fucking knight on the cover and shit, I don't know why, and I was like, man, this book fucking, like, this book fucks. Like, this is a good fucking book. So then I bought some of her other stuff, and I was like kind of working my way backwards, where I was like, I read My Antonia, and I was like, this book is also amazing. I read One of Ours, and I was like, this book was long and honestly very fucking dry. Let's hope O Pioneers is great. And it wasn't. And so, like, I could finish out the Prairie trilogy just by reading Song of the Lark, and it's probably really good, but I'm not going to, because O Pioneers fucking killed it for me. Just, there's too much farming to be had, you know, honestly.
Yeah, dude.
There's only so much. Don't
Like,
worry.
I had a really hard fucking time getting through just, like, learning about this. I can't imagine actually reading this.
I'm sorry that there had to be 2 episodes on her, but there's a
Fuck,
lot that
dude.
went through her first.
Come on!
What?
This was fucking rough.
The second part's great. You know, once she's actually, like,
I mean, it's
famous.
fine. It's
There was a lot
it's
that
just
happened for that first part, though. That's the
cool.
thing.
It's cool. Like, whatever. But, like, Jesus, dude. Like, maybe make the ones that aren't as exciting. Maybe condense them into one.
I couldn't.
Why not? What do you mean you fucking couldn't? Of course you fucking could. You fucking write it.
I wasted my time reading O Pioneers. I'm gonna waste your time by having you listen to me bitch about O Pioneers. We could condense 2 episodes into like 1 2-hour long episode.
I mean,
you'd be fucking drunk and passed out by the time.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Like, it just this one was a rough one.
Actually, this one was fine.
I mean,
the first part, I get it.
Man.
Look, I know. I really, really wanted to research her, and I did. And I was like, fuck, man. Going into it, I was like, this is going to be dry. It's going to be dry as a Nebraska plain. But it's picking up. It's picking up from here. Don't worry.
Drier than Ben Shapiro's wife.
Excuse me, but if no,
you have nothing.
I have nothing.
Let's stop it. Let's get goofed.